Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's EnRoute webinar. My name's Bennett. I'll be the moderator for today, and our presenter is Aaron Clapp, Application Specialist at SAI. He knows everything there is to know about EnRoute, and today he'll be showing us the intuitive advanced nesting tools in EnRoute, which can help you save material by placing your parts in the most efficient way possible. After the presentation, we'll be able to answer any questions you have either about nesting or any other EnRoute topics, so feel free to put those questions in the chat and we'll answer as many as we can. We are recording the webinar as always, so if you want to review anything that Aaron discusses, we'll be sending you the link here this afternoon, so look out for that in your emails. And that's about it from me, so I'll turn the presentation over to Aaron.
All right, so this is basically going to be kind of a quick and thorough discussion of kind of the EnRoute nesting and some of the features and things like that. And so, how to get the best out of the nesting and what some of the options are if you're not familiar with them. We'll also talk about the block nester and what that's used for and what kind of its strengths are and what its weaknesses are. And then we'll talk about just every option that's in the nesting. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So got EnRoute 7 pulled up here. And just so you are aware, as of today, there is a new build out available. So if you're running an older version of EnRoute and you've maybe experienced a few bugs or something, there's a new version out. I believe it's EnRoute 7.0.115 or something like that. Anyway, there's a new version out. You might want to check that out if you get a chance. So now that we're looking at nesting, nesting options is if you're using let's actually draw some stuff on screen so that we can have some pieces here to deal with. Maybe a couple rectangles and perhaps maybe a circle. Or maybe we'll do we'll just do a circle here. Keep things relatively simple. Okay, so if I select objects, if you're in EnRoute 7 default view, your nesting options are going to be right up here. And you've got nest objects, dynamic nest, and view nest report. The one we're going to focus on is nest objects. The dynamic nest is it's kind of a neat nester, but it's very manual, and it requires a lot of, work on the user's part to use. So this is kind of a very, very simple nester. Most of you are going to want to use the nest objects, which is the full advanced nesting. Or you can also find this under transform, nest, nest object. So you get the same option to the transform menu. So one of the things to remember about nesting is that you always want to have the parts you're going to nest outside of your plate. So you see here that I've got a plate that's just a 4x8 sheet. And that's what we're working on today. And I've got these parts here that I want to cut out. When nesting, you can nest in one of two ways. You can nest them untoolpathed, or you can nest them toolpathed. One thing to consider, or one thing to kind of just remember, is that if either way you nest parts, if you have, for example, say a part that has maybe like a cabinet side that has like some holes in it for adjustable shelving, or it's got some slots or anything like that, you're going to want to make sure that those objects are grouped before you go in and do anything else. So for example, if I had another little slot that I was going to be cutting into this piece down here, I would need to make sure and group these things together before I nest them. Otherwise, it'll treat them as separate pieces. So I would just need to make sure and group those so that when I click on them, it selects both. That way, when it nests it, it doesn't try and grab this piece and move it away and think of it as a separate part. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, another thing to keep in mind is before you decide whether you're going to toolpath or sorry, nest before you toolpath or after is the difficulty of toolpathing the object. So if you're going to be using maybe several different types of toolpaths or several different types of cuts on certain objects, it would be way better for you to go ahead and toolpath the objects ahead of time and then do the nesting versus having a full nest and then trying to go through there and click through the individual objects after they've been nested then do that. But if everything's going to get the same toolpath, then I think you're okay. You could do that later. One of the other disadvantages I would say one of the reasons why I prefer to design and then toolpath before I nest is it gives me the ability to uh, be a little more flexible with my nesting in terms of I don't have to think about what tool and what my gaps need to be and things like that. So if you do nest with the objects on toolpath, you do need to make sure and set a big enough gap and margin for that toolpath to make sure that the tool won't accidentally cut into the part next to it. So that's just kind of something you have to keep in mind. You have to know what tool you're going to use beforehand and just make sure that you build in that gap or that cushion for each part so that the toolpath doesn't gouge into the part next to it. So I'm just going to throw a simple toolpath on here. I'm going to do all my demonstrations with the toolpath pre-applied. Um, the nesting basically operates the same whether you have the nesting with the toolpath or without the toolpath. So I'm just going to come in here and we'll just grab a end mill here. And let's just say we'll use a 1/4 inch. And it doesn't really matter our depth, so we'll just say 1 inch. That's that's our material thickness. So we're not going to do anything really super special with this. I'm just going to hit OK, just so that we have a toolpath on screen. Okay, so now onto the nester. So we want to highlight everything that is going to be nested. And again, we want to have that outside of the plate. This is kind of easy stuff there. So we'll click on the nesting button, and then it shows us the pink objects. Now, the pink objects are the items you have selected. So for example, if I only selected 2 items, then that third object is not going to be nested. So just so you know that that's kind of what that indicates there. So the other thing is we have some colors here. So the pink color means that this is going to be an object that I have currently selected. So for example, what this is actually going to allow me to do is this allows me to edit the quantity of these objects or this nest as a group. So when I say 10, that's going to give me 10 copies of each shape. Now, if that's not what I want, or I would prefer to customize the amount, I can then, while I'm in the nesting screen, I can go ahead and just click on one of these objects and the other 2 go gray or like a dark, or it's like a light green or whatever. So this color means that they're not selected. So now I can come in here and say, well, I want 10 of these. And I'm going to click on this one and I want 8 of these. And I want 5 of these. So now when I go back and I click on this one, my quantity changed. So now I've got a quantity for each one. And if I try and highlight them all, my quantity actually goes blank because we've already set a custom amount for each. So I could reset that by just putting in 10, and then that'll just reset it back to 10. Our priority order here is if you need to nest something specifically first. So the priority order goes increasingly. So 5, I believe, is the least important, and then 1 is the most important. And so if there was a part that you needed to nest first for whatever reason, or you wanted to nest it first, you could set a different priority number and it would nest that object first and then nest everything else around it. So that's kind of a nice little feature to have there. You'll notice that we have the two nesting buttons over here, and by default, it's just going to go to the shape nester. There is the block nester here, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But just note that the default is the shape nester, and you have to click on the block nester to get into that. So we'll talk about that one in a minute. There's a lot of different options here, and some of these options work and some of them don't with certain nesting standards. So, for example, you'll notice here that we have three different nesters: standard, new, and legacy. Standard is the basic nester that we used to use in EnRoute 5. It's a pretty solid nester. It's sufficient. It does a good job. The new is the new nester that we came out with in EnRoute 6 that allows us to do certain things like use the obstruction option. It also allows us to use the create remnant option. So that's going to be important. If you want to be able to create a remnant or use the obstruct feature, you need to use the new one. Also, if you're having trouble with nesting, say for example, maybe something is not quite working right. If I switch back to standard here, you'll notice that let's say that we want the parts to nest in the bottom right hand corner, but we want them to stay flat along the part and then nest their way up like this. Well, that's not really something we can do with the standard nester because it only allows us to choose one of these. So only one of these can be selected at the same time. So it's going to nest them in the bottom right-hand corner and just start to pile stuff up in that bottom right-hand corner until it fills up the plate. The great thing about the new is that now with the new, we can actually select multiple. So I can click on this one and this one. So it will nest in the bottom right-hand corner and towards the bottom. So it'll nest here and then fill up on the bottom. So that might not seem like a big deal, but there is certain circumstances where in certain shapes and things like that, you would prefer it not to nest in kind of like a bunch in the corner, and you'd rather it run across the bottom like this. And that actually would help make your nest a little bit better. So it's something to kind of play around with. If you're having trouble with a nester, try selecting more than one. Sometimes that will help, and that's all enabled by the new nester. Now, the legacy, I probably wouldn't really recommend using this one. This is a nesting standard that we produced way back in the EnRoute 4 days. Now, for whatever reason, we have some customers that still like to use it. It does well for them, and so we just include it because we can. So each one of these just has a slightly different algorithm or mathematical formula that they use, and so sometimes you could just switch and see if it gives you a better result or not. So it's worth checking into if you're having issues with it nesting or doing something strange. Try the new or try the legacy and see if it makes any difference. So let's kind of go over some of the stuff here. We got the gap and the margin. I think these are pretty self-explanatory, but the gap is the gap in between each part. So how far away the piece is when I nest. Now, one of the things that you can do, which is an advantage on the, if you toolpath with the, or you nest with the toolpaths already on, is I can just leave this at 0. And this will give me uh, a pretty close nest. And I can even go negative on this value. So toolpaths would actually overlap each other or yeah. So this is something you can do really well. Now you can also do this on the other, but obviously you don't want to have parts overlapping each other because then you have problems. But so we can go negative on these numbers. Same with the margin. The margin is just the distance away from the edge of the material. So this sets how far away from the edge that you're going to get and things like that. So we'll just leave these at default 0.1, but that's those settings. Now, nest originals. I'm typically not a fan of this option. And one of the reasons why is because when you nest originals, let's say we want 10 copies and hit apply. In this case, it's going to make multiple sheets because I have that option selected. Also note that I think I had the middle option selected, so it nested everything in the middle. So when you hit the nest button, if it creates multiple sheets, you're going to get something that looks like this. It kind of looks like it's nested the parts on top of each other. That's not necessarily true. What it's actually showing you is EnRoute's just actually giving you a preview of all the layers nested together. Um, when you switch layers to nested one or layer one, that instantly goes away. So it's just kind of like a thing there for you to kind of see that, hey, by the way, I did nest multiple sheets. So it's kind of just a visual indication for you that it did multiple sheets and things like that. So this is a pretty terrible nest. But one of the things that I notice about this nest is that I didn't like it. So now I have to sit here and I have to click on these objects and move them back out here in order to re-nest it. So we'll go back to my nested one. I got to grab one of these and pull it. So I'm not a fan of that. And so now I need to grab everything, delete it, and start over. But I had to pull everything out. So for me, I would much prefer just not check the nest originals. And then if I create a nest and I like how it nested, then in that case, I can just grab everything that's on here, delete it, start over. I don't have to worry about my originals or anything. If I'm ready to toolpath, then all I have to do is delete these guys over here, and then I just output my screen as is. So that's kind of why I prefer the nest originals to be off. Multiple sheets, this is kind of self-explanatory. You can turn this off and it'll nest as many items as it possibly can onto one sheet and then kind of let you know or just and then it doesn't create any additional sheets. Multiple sheets is nice because then it'll create multiple nested pages like we saw here. Now the creator remnant, this is kind of a unique feature. So if we check this option, and I'm also going to check the option for create summary, and I'm going to switch it to new. So I'm on the new nester, which I guess that's what I was already on. Create remnant allows me to create a leftover piece of the material based on what was left over. So let's just say I have a quantity of 5 of each. I'm going to create my remnant and my summary. I'm going to set my step angle at 90 for now. That's fine, and hit apply. Okay, so there seems to be something weird here going on with my nesting. I don't know if I'm choosing the wrong things. I might need to uncheck that center option. I think that's what's happened because I've got that checked. Okay, so and I keep forgetting. Let's delete this and try again. Let's see here. Yeah, uncheck that option and let's check these two. Let's uncheck the obstruct for now, and we don't need multiple sheets, and we'll do a quantity of 5. Okay, there we go. So I told it to nest in the corner and towards the bottom, and so it's left me with a piece that kind of looks like this. And we'll pull this out here so we can kind of see it better. But this is the piece that it cut out. Now, this is our remnant. So this is something that you can actually now grab, and you can actually take this and make this your new plate. So if I go up here to my plate options, I can say define plate from contour, and I click on that, and this now becomes my new plate, and I can nest inside of this plate. So this is kind of nice. So if you're the type of user who likes to save your sheets that have the leftovers and then reuse them, you can export this as a DXF file, give it a name, that whatever you use for your labeling system. If you use stickers or some kind of labeling system for parts, you can export that as a DXF, save it, and then bring it in, and then just create that as your new plate later on. So that's kind of a nice option. The other option that we checked was the summary report. So if I go to my nesting options now and I click on View Nest Report, oh, you know what? Hold on a second. I am going to need to make a small change here. So, okay, so I have my XML files all set so that they will open in this program called text editor. So I'm going to have to assign. So this is something that you might run into, you may not. I need to reassign the program that I open XML files with. So instead of Notepad, we're going to go with choose another app. So when I do that, I'm going to choose Internet Explorer, and then I'm going to click on a checkbox that says always open this app to open XML files. And that was kind of off screen, so you really couldn't tell. But okay, so now I'm going to delete that file because there's nothing in it. We'll go back to EnRoute, and we should be able to view our nesting report. Of course, it's not showing anything. Let's try this again. So we're going to go ahead and do the nest again. We're going to copy, and let's just start with a new file. Paste the active layer. Nest. Create the remnant. Let's not create the remnants this time. Let's just do the summary. Let's say I want 5 of each. And we're going to do the new, and we're just going to do in this corner, bottom right-hand corner. Apply. And hopefully this will nest or give us our nesting report. I should have checked this ahead of time. Is this, oh, this is Microsoft Edge. Oh, good grief. All right, hold on, guys. Sorry. Let's try this one more time. I need to make sure it's Internet Explorer, not Microsoft Edge. Open with, choose another app. Internet Explorer, always use this app. Okay, there's nothing in that file, so that's fine. Now let's go back in here. It still wants to open it with Edge. Edge is a broken browser. So anyway, if you have it set to Internet Explorer, which should be your default, you should be able to see a nesting report. And what it shows you is, I'm going to quick see if I can pull that nesting report and open it with a specific application. Nest summary, nest report.xml. Let's open it with Internet Explorer. Okay, every time I open it with Internet Explorer, it opens up Microsoft Edge. This must be something new with, can we choose a different app? Maybe, can we choose, oh, good grief. I'll have to look into this. I don't know. Internet Explorer used to always work, so I'll have to make sure that I can actually see that. But typically you'd see a nesting report, and if you look in that, you'll see a picture of the entire nest, and if you have multiple sheets, it will show you all the pictures of each nest. It's going to give you a description of each layer and how many parts were in there, what parts were nested there, the quantity of each part nested, and then you're also going to get a bunch of statistics about each one of those sheets. So like the yield, how many square feet or square inches, whatever your units are, and all kinds of other information about that sheet will be on that nesting report. So it's a really useful tool to kind of get a nicer sheet you can print out and then hand out to somebody who's actually doing the nest or the cutting on the machine, so they can be aware of, hey, these are the parts that are going to be on these sheets, and here, there's the quantity of them, there's the position of them, so you can kind of be aware of what is on each sheet. So that's kind of a nice feature there. So let's go back to our nesting though. Let's grab our objects, and while we're at it, let's take a circle and draw it over here. All right, so if I decide that I want to use the obstruct feature, which for whatever reason, let's say I have some knots or something on this piece or this part of my piece of plywood or whatever I'm cutting into that I don't want to nest parts into because it's either unacceptable or it's broken or whatever the case may be. If I highlight that, as I go into my nesting, it will turn red, which means that that is going to be an object that it's going to consider as an obstruction. So if I click on obstruct, and I put, let's do a quantity of 5 again. 5, not 51. There we go. And as I nest, it's going to nest around this object, and that's indicated by the red color. Now, the last thing I kind of skipped over was these two options: use holes and the step angle. The step angle here is basically how much it's allowed to rotate the part at any given moment as it's nesting. The lower you go, the slower your nest will be, but the more accurate or the better yield supposedly you're going to get. What I found in my practical use is that anything below 15 just takes longer and you get about the same yield. So you can kind of test this on your own, but let's say you're nesting, 500 parts. If you select 1 or 5 versus 15 or 30, you're actually going to notice a significant difference in time. And that's just because it's having to take every piece and rotate it by 1 degree increments and then do that for 500 parts. So your nest might actually be 2 or 3 or maybe even 5 to 10 minutes long. So, in my opinion, sometimes the yield on these lower percentages doesn't really give you near as much as you think it would give you. Um, and 15 I've found is probably like your best option. In this case, we're just dealing with rectangles and squares, so 90 is fine. But take note of that. If you have weird shapes like stars or oddly shaped items that you want them to try and nest together, you are going to want to lower this number to somewhere between 15 and 10. Now, again, if you're only nesting, let's say 30 or 40 pieces, you could probably go down to 1 or 0, and it probably won't be that long. It'll just be a couple extra seconds. But just know that that is a thing. So if you're doing large amounts of parts, I would probably stay away from the lower settings just because it's just going to take way too long. And then if you don't like the nest, you've just wasted 5 minutes. So just kind of a note there. The use holes option, if you have parts, say like you had the letter O, and you had smaller parts that could fit inside the letter O, it would try and nest it inside of there. So that's kind of what the use holes option is for. Let's go ahead and hit apply, and we'll see what it does here with the obstruction. So here was my obstruction, and you can see that it nested around it. So it completely avoided this area or this area of the sheet. So I could do that with any part, anywhere. I could line up all the places where the knots are and just exclude them from the job completely. Or if I have a piece of damaged sheet on this side, or if there's something going on in the middle that I don't want a cluster of knots or, whatever it is, damage on the material, but you still don't want to throw it away, you can get around that by using the obstruct feature in the nesting options. Lastly, let's take a look at our block nester. Now, the block nester is kind of a unique tool. The block nester is only designed for rectangles and squares, and that's it. You don't want any kind of circle or anything like that is really not ideal for this nester. So I hit nest, and I go down to block nester. Now you'll notice that a lot of the features and options have been removed. And that's because it's designed to be a fast nester, very simple, and it only allows you to rotate the parts by 90 degrees. So it kind of just does all that for you, and I believe it automatically nests to the bottom left. So the main feature or the main advantage of using the block nester here in this case is if you want to use what we call, well, for one thing, for speed. If all you have is rectangles or squares, this is the fastest nesting option that you can get. So It's very, very fast, even faster than the new or the standard nester from the other side. You've got a lot of the same options in here, but the only one that I would really kind of want to highlight here is the create common line. What this allows you to do, it creates a common line in between your parts that can save you some time. So if you have two rectangles butted up next to each other, instead of running the toolpath through there twice, you could just run it through there once and save yourself a bunch of time in cutting. Now, this is a little bit more manual of a process, but let's just set 10 as our desired quantity, and we're going to do this on one sheet. I'm going to say create my common line and allow rotate. These are already toolpath, and they actually have to be toolpath in order for you to use the create common line option. So I hit apply, and it's going to nest everything for me. And now what it's done is it's nested them all the way together, and then it's created a common line for me here. And I might have had a gap in my parts, so that might have been a problem. Let's just double check that. Yes, I'm going to set my part gap to 0 because that doesn't make sense to have a common line and have a gap of anything. So up to 10 here again. Why? Okay. So now you can see here that it's nested these toolpaths right up next to each other. Now what I'm going to do, and it's created this common line. I can grab this common line. I could drag it away, just kind of visually see it. These are the lines that it has created where it sees, it said, hey, these toolpaths are actually touching each other here. I could just create a line right here instead. So it's created this grid for us essentially. And all I need to do is highlight everything that's in here, delete the toolpath that I had, select my common line, and then I could do an engraved toolpath. So we're going out of specialty, engrave. I'm going to use the same tool, my 1/4 inch end mill. Give it the same depth. Hit OK. And now I've got one toolpath where any place where two objects are meeting each other, it will never cut twice. So this can save you a bunch of time. If this is something that you do a lot, the block nester can help you with that option there. So again, it adds a little bit of an extra step to your nest. But if you're doing this kind of stuff a lot, the amount of time that you can save just by not having to cut through stuff twice could actually be worth the effort in a minute or two extra of design time or toolpathing time could save you probably 20-30 minutes in the long run, depending on, or more, if you do this kind of thing frequently. So that's the block nester, a very efficient, quick, fast nesting algorithm that allows you to do the common line cutting if that's something that you do frequently. Even if you don't do frequently and you run into a job that needs to do that kind of cutting, it can save a ton of time. So it's worth knowing that it's there. So I think that covers everything on nesting. I kind of went a little bit long than we normally would do, but there's a lot in the nesting to play with, to mess with, and to check and look at. This is kind of a brief, fast overview on that. Do we have any questions about the nesting in general or about the common line cutting or anything that we have available here or anything about EnRoute in general?
If you do come up with any questions after the presentation ends today, you can always add a question or a comment to the YouTube video, which the link for that will be sent to you later today. And then we'll try to answer questions from there as well, if you have any. Kenneth has a question. Who can I talk to in regards to setting up EnRoute for a specific machine?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. Depends on the machine. Tech support would be probably the best to talk to you about how to kind of get it set up generally. That's something that I used to do as a tech support agent as well. If you're running one of the simpler machines like a multicam, or one of the default drivers. It's a fairly simple process, and I think I actually might even have a video on our YouTube channel that kind of addresses setting up your driver. But overall, if you have a more complex machine, that might be where we might even have a write-up for it, like a document that we could send you. I know for like the BSEs, for example, we do have a document that we can send customers. So, kind of help you get it set up, or what are the expectations for that driver? How do we, how do you set up your tool changer and stuff like that? If it's a Gerber 408. Okay, so the Gerber 408 is a little bit of a different beast. Mainly, you're going to go to your driver selection, obviously, and this is where you're going to set up your driver, and it'll pop up here in a second. It's on my other screen here, I believe. Oh, there it is. Okay, and so you're going to go to your machine setup, and you're going to select. And so in your case, you're going to go in and grab your Gerber 408. Let's see here it is. You'll click OK. You have several different parameters here to choose from. The most important ones are going to be if you have a tool changer or not, you turn it on, and then you click here to add your tools. And then if you have a drill bank, so this probably won't apply to the Gerber, but if you have a drill bank, you click on it and then click Edit, and then you optimize your drill bank. So basically, you'll look at the diagram that you have on your machine, and then you'll basically copy that here. So you'll add your tools and things like that here. And then your driver units. This is going to be an important one. So this is not the units that you design in EnRoute. These are the units that get output to your machine. So you can output in different units that you design in. So if your machine requires millimeters, you put that in here. And then you need to make sure you know what the time is, or the speed. So if your machine uses inches per second or millimeters per second, you'll put that there, and then you'll just match the time to the second value. So if you use inches per minute, you'll use minutes. If you use inches per second, you use seconds, that kind of thing. And those are basically it for 90% of all drivers, because most of them you just output to file. The Gerber is a little bit different. It is the only machine that we can communicate to directly. Now, that's what you need to come in here and set your communication parameters. So you'll need to set your port and whatnot. I think we do have a document on how to set these settings that we could probably send you if you ask tech support. They could email it to you. The biggest problem, and I'm just going to say this up front, the biggest problem that we have with the Gerbers right now is the piece of software that Gerber gave us way back in the day when we first started running these machines is very old. And it does not like to talk to a Gerber over a USB to serial port adapter. If you do decide to get a USB to serial port adapter, I would make sure that you get one that has a CD with it that you can install the driver. It's really important. Or the other option is if you have a PC, like a desktop PC that has an expansion slot, I would actually just go on Amazon or some computer store like maybe Best Buy or something like that and get an expansion card that allows you to have a native COM port. That's probably going to be a better option. Again, make sure that you get one that has drivers. Software drivers for Windows are very important. So those are your two options. If you get a USB to serial, make sure it has a driver. Best option would be, if you're not using a laptop, get an expansion card for your PC that has a COM port. That way you're eliminating the issue of the USB to serial port, because not all USB to serial port adapters are made the same. Trust me, we've been through a million of them, and the cheap ones that you buy on Amazon that don't have a driver, 90% of the time they won't work. So just a tip there. So I will say that it's very tricky to get them. I have done them quite a bit. So if you're interested in doing a one-on-one session, Addendo is where everything that we do training wise for Flexi is done. So there's several people I think that could help you on there, including myself. So if that's something you're really interested in and can't seem to get it to work, we could always try and set up a session and see if we could figure it out. But I'll say that the Gerbers are not easy just because of that USB to serial port thing that it has. But
All right. And Kenneth, I posted the link for tech support there, and then for Addendo training if you need any additional help. Let's see. Tom had a question. Can you view multiple sheets/plates at one time after nesting?
yeah, so basically every time when you're in a document like this and you create a nest, and then I choose multiple sheets, and let's just say I want 50 of these. See, and I'm going to go here, new multiple sheets applied. So what it'll basically do is the initial nest is going to show it to you all in one, and then so it'll show it to you like this, and then when you move to the next layer, well, actually in this case I have it unchecked, but this little option right here next to your layers, this is the show all layers option. So I can show all my layers at the same time if I want to, or show them only one at a time. So if I only show one at a time, I can cycle through here and kind of check each nest as I want to. Or I can check them all at the same time. Or if I want even more customizability, if I check this little box right here or click this option, define layers, I can go in here and I can tell it which layers I want to be on and which ones I want to be off. So I could turn off a bunch of layers and say, I only want you to show me 2 and 3, and then hit OK. And then it'll just show me layers 2 and 3. So I can kind of get real granular with that, or however I want that to look like in terms of my layers. And the way to get that, I believe, is under the view menu. It used to be under the view menu. Why am I not seeing it? Either I'm not seeing it because I'm blind, or I think it might have moved. Oh, here we go. Setup, toolbars, and here's all your toolbars. So if layers is unchecked, then it means that it's not showing up here, which I believe, but in the default view for 7, it shows up. But if you're using EnRoute 6, sometimes the layers option wouldn't default as open. It would default closed. And so you might have to go into the toolbars option and then just turn it on and it'll show up.
So just to clarify, Aaron, there's no way to look at them at the same time. You would have to toggle between the layers individually.
No, not. I now that you asked to say that again, no, not in a kind of granular way where each layer is like outside of each other. No. So like if you were wanting to show them all in the same space, no, the answer to that is no. You either look at them individually or all as a group, or things like that via the layers here, but not, you can't split them out into like a split view where you see each layer in its own thing.
And Ryan just pointed out that the nesting report breaks it down as well.
Yes, the nesting report does break it down by sheet. So you get an image, which I wish I would have tested that before. But I have my default program I always use for XML files is Notepad++, because I edit other XML files on my for EnRoute, and I prefer that application. But Notepad++ won't show you the visual graphic. So I'll have to figure out what the deal is. I just upgraded to Windows 11 on this PC, so it's possible it might be some issue with Windows 11 and that, but I'll have to check and find out what the issue is with that. It could just be my install or something, but any other case, I was able to view those with Internet Explorer, but for some reason Internet Explorer is not opening. It keeps wanting to open up Microsoft Edge, which is just terrible. So it never seems to do what you want it to do. So But so that's kind of a shame there. But and
Yeah,
if it
and
is a
Ryan,
bug, then we'll fix it. But
yeah, Ryan said he was having similar issues where his browser wouldn't let him access the report. So Aaron
I
will look
know
into
that
that.
Yeah, I know that Google Chrome sometimes in the past has had issues with it too. So that's why I always used Internet Explorer. But now that I've seen it, I'm probably going to do some more testing on it just to make sure that works. If there is a bug with it, we'll make sure and get it fixed 100% because that's a key feature, obviously. So be rest assured that we definitely will get that fixed. So that's something we know. We can't just let that one be. So that'll be fixed pretty soon if it is an issue.
All right. Are there any final questions before we sign out for today? Thanks, Aaron, for answering the ones that we've had so far. And again, like I said, if you come up with any questions that you haven't thought of now, you can always add them to the YouTube video comments, and we'll get them answered there. Don't see any other questions coming in, so we'll go ahead and close it out for today. Thank you all again for joining us for today's EnRoute webinar. Our next EnRoute webinar will be about working with reliefs, which will allow you to design 3D parts. So that'll be a good one, and that'll be a month from today on March 15th, and we hope to see you there. Make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter so you won't miss out on any webinar announcements. You can sign up for that on our website. Thanks again for being here. We hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one.